get this, we're going all the way back to, well, Hitler.
Okay, yeah, bear with me on this one, but you know that whole the big lie thing? Well, turns out it's a real thing.
Like a real strategy.
Yeah.
And a pretty messed up one, right?
Right, absolutely. Hitler himself, he actually laid it all out in his little book, Mein Kampf.
Which, not exactly light reading.
No, not at all. But the basic idea is the more outrageous the lie, the more people are going to swallow it.
Wait, really? Like, wouldn't a crazy lie be easier to, see through?
You'd think so, right. But, see, Hitler was banking on how we humans, well, we tend to let emotions drive the bus, even when logic's screaming, stop.
Ah, so that's how he pulled it off in Germany.
Yeah, in the 1930s, he used the big lie to paint the Jews as the ultimate villains.
Like, blame them for every single problem.
Exactly. Turned them into scapegoats. Played on people's fears and anxieties, and, with all the propaganda.
The radio, the newspapers, even kids' books, right?
Yeah. Yep. All hammering home the same message. Jews are evil. They're making you suffer. They gotta go.
And people just, bought it.
Well, that's the scary part. With enough repetition, enough emotional manipulation, even, the reasonable folks start doubting themselves.
That's messed up. It makes you think, though, could this big lie thing happen, anywhere, anytime?
Oh, absolutely. It's not just some dusty history lesson.
Okay, so where else do we see this playing out?
Well, this might get a little controversial, but let's talk about how Islam is often presented.
Yeah, you always hear Islam is a religion of peace. And, there are definitely peaceful verses in the Quran, right?
Oh, for sure. Lots about compassion and kindness. But there are also some passages that, well, they kind of clash with that message.
Passages that call for violence, even specifically against Jews.
Yeah. Take Quran 9.3. It straight up calls for the destruction of Jews. And then there are these hadith.
Hadith, those are stories about Muhammad?
Yeah, collections of sayings and traditions attributed to him. And some of them, well, they talk about wiping out the Jews as a sign of the end times.
Wow, okay. And it's not just about Jews either, right? There's that verse, Quran 4.34, the one about husbands.
Disciplining their wives.
Yeah, if they suspect disobedience.
Right. So obviously, a lot of Islamic scholars, they interpret these controversial verses differently. They say they're allegorical or tied to a specific historical context, not, instructions for today.
Okay, that makes sense. There are different ways to understand those texts. But here's the thing. Even with all this internal debate, the main message, especially in the West, is still Islam is peaceful.
Exactly. So it kind of makes you wonder, why is that? Why focus so much on that one side of the story?
Is it like a deliberate strategy? Or just, I don't know, maybe people trying to be overly optimistic?
It's tough to say for sure, but it does bring up the question. Could this emphasis on peaceful Islam, even with all the complexities, could it be a kind of big lie at work?
Like if you repeat something enough, even if it's not the whole truth, do people just start accepting it as fact?
Exactly. And think about it. Has that message, Islam is peaceful, has that shaped your own view of the faith? Have you ever, really dug into it, looked for other perspectives?
That's a good point. We shouldn't just accept any narrative at face value.
Absolutely. Now, to be fair, a lot of folks, both within Islam and outside it, they argue that the faith can evolve, that those more troubling verses, they don't reflect how millions of Muslims actually live their lives.
Right, there are progressive Muslims who are pushing for a more, modern interpretation, one that emphasizes human rights and equality.
Right, exactly. It's important to remember that no religion is a monolith. There's always a spectrum of beliefs and practices.
Totally. So going back to the big lie, is it possible that as a society, we're just more comfortable with a simpler, maybe even a bit sanitized view of Islam?
It's an interesting question. Does it make us feel safer to think that most Muslims are peaceful, even if that's based on, a selective reading of the texts?
It's definitely something to think about. And it makes you wonder, where else might this big lie tactic be popping up?
Oh, it's everywhere. Think about political campaigns, advertising, even those viral trends on social media. We're drowning in narratives. And a lot of them are designed to play us like a fiddle.
So how do we protect ourselves from being manipulated?
We got to get better at critical thinking, question everything, look for different perspectives, and be willing to challenge our own assumptions.
So it's not about rejecting everything we hear, but about being more discerning.
Exactly. In a world where information can be a weapon, critical thinking is our best defense. It's how we avoid falling for the big lie, whether it's about, history, religion, whatever.
Okay, so what's the takeaway for our listeners? What should they be thinking about after this deep dive?
Well, just remember, the stories we're told, they have a huge impact on how we see the world. So take ownership of the information you consume. Question the beliefs you hold. Keep digging, keep exploring, keep seeking the truth. Because, in the end, that's the best way to fight back against the big lie.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I try.
All right, that's it for our deep dive today. Thanks for listening, everyone.
See ya next time.